Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the We Go Boldly podcast. We are, as we always are, super, super excited to have you with us today on the show. It is the middle of the summer. We are pre-recording, but when you're listening, it's the middle of the summer. And we have an exciting show for you today, another interview. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy doing these interviews. It's been a complete change to the podcast, and I have really enjoyed it. It's been such a great thing. Before we dive in, though, I will, as I always do, say hello and welcome to my fantastical, because I can't get away from that word. I just can't do it, Tova.
Don't even try.
My amazing and wonderful co-host, Tova. How are you today? We're pretending it's August. For us, it's not quite August yet, but we're thinking about what we might be doing in August, I guess.
Well, it's funny because at the last episode we recorded, I was like, I'm channeling the Tova that will be the July Tova.
That's right. I forgot about that.
But now I am still on the high from the concert I was at last night. So just in case August Tova needs a pick me up in like the dog days of summer, I'm like bringing that with me.
Yes.
So, so I'm just going to take whichever Tova is like the cheeriest and try to be that Tova. So
I like it.
I'm great because last night was awesome. And we have an interview today.
Yeah, we do have an interview.
Fun.
So, and we're still talking about, the same topic, which everyone knows for season 6 is about busyness and self-worth and how we sort of define our own version of worthiness, and how in this country, especially, but I think globally in a lot of ways, busyness has been used as a substitute for worthiness. And as everyone who's been listening to us all along knows, we'd like to bring on guests to get like a larger perspective of how people have dealt with this in their own lives, how they deal with it professionally, and kind of how it comes into play for different people. So we have a broader perspective of what it means in the world. And it's not just the two of us talking all the time. Although I have to say, I think our research skills are on point, and we're doing a pretty good job of bringing in some science here. So I'm just going to give us a pat on the back.
I like it.
but without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Tova, to introduce our guest, and let's get started. Let's get into the interview.
Awesome. Yes. So our guest today is Jessica Medina. There she is. Hello. Yes. She is a former lawyer turned accredited financial counselor on a mission to help attorneys figure out their finances so that they can pursue their true passions, no matter their salary. She graduated from Columbia Law School as a single mom of twins with over $200,000 in student loans. She took a stroll through big law and the federal government, and now she teaches other lawyers, including me, how to use their money to finance their dream lives. And we are so excited to have you here. Welcome, Jessica.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. Just listening to some of the conversations you guys have had on this podcast. I'm excited to dig in, and the energy is always so good. Thinking of my August version, gosh, I guess I might be in the upper Northeast in Maine. And right now I'm in Minnesota. So I'm trailing like the 75-degree average temperature. That's my goal this summer.
I like that. I think that's a good plan. I might have to aim for that in the future. That's a really good plan.
Well, it's funny because so our first question I'm going to ask you, but you may have just answered it. So the first question we dive right in is, how do you define success? Is it being with 75 degrees at all times?
Right. I mean, you're not wrong, I have to say.
that would definitely be a successful RV trip. I think
Right.
the extent that you can keep yourself in temperate weather as much as possible. I think for me, I've had so many different definitions of success over my life, and it's a little weird right now. I am embodying a version of success that I imagined for myself earlier on, and not surprisingly, my body is kind of rejecting it and saying, well, this can't be success because this is reality. So there must be some other version of success that is out there that you must now go and seek. And so that is my struggle right now. I am dealing with my own success and trying to figure out how to be accepting of it and happy with it, since it is all of these things that I told myself, yeah, this is where I would be when I was successful.
That's
That's
so
interesting.
Yeah,
Oh.
I was we're having the same reaction. It's so interesting because so many people kind of set out goals, right? And they set out like this framework of where they expect to be, and like a checklist and a thought process of where, okay, in 5 years I'm going to be at this place, and I'm going to have these certain things, and I'm going to have this kind of level of success. I hate to use the word in the definition, but this place where I want to get to. And then they get there and then they go, okay, now what? Now what do I do? And so when you're saying you find yourself kind of in that scenario now, is it for you a matter of it's not actually what you thought it would be? Or is it a matter of accepting that you've actually achieved what you set out to achieve?
I think it has more to do with the acceptance, because for so much of my life, I have been conditioned for the striving,
Yep.
right? For the working toward, for the path to, for the journey toward. And, I think this happens with a lot of quote unquote success, right? Or when you achieve a goal, there is this kind of moment of disappointment afterwards, like,
Yeah.
oh, now all of my striving is over.
Yeah.
It was elated. I'm elated for a moment, and then I go into this like slump of, oh, what do I do now? And so because this is it's really how I have now designed my life. I'm in a very different phase in my life vis-a-vis who I am as a woman, who I am as a mother, who I am as a former lawyer, and who I am as a business owner. All of those things have now come to a point where I imagined that I would feel successful at this moment. And I am learning how to allow myself to feel successful and feel satiated with that success until I decide that I want something more. But it's a
Right.
weird position to be in.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, next week, actually, it's the perfect timing for us to have this conversation, because next week next episode, we're going to be talking about not pursuing goals just for the sake of pursuing goals, and not like pursuing achievement just because we are so conditioned to just, we should continue to achieve something. I mean, Riley and I love goal setting. Like, we're big fans of it, and we're big fans of achievement, but like, not if it's not something that you want, not if it's just because you're like, well, I need to be striving towards something to be fulfilled. It's like, well, why? And so it's interesting that you're sort of figuring that out now, and navigating that. In the past, like you said, your definition of success has changed, going like way to the past. How did your family, as you were growing up, define success?
So I think for my family, I come from basically a family of immigrants. My mother moved here from the Dominican Republic when she was 10. So their version of success was, a version of survival. And my father's family, my father was born in the US, but both of his parents were born in Puerto Rico. And similarly, it really was just a story of, can we make it in a new place, in a new culture, and be accepted and have these outward things that look like success to everyone in the United States, right? Can you have a good job and a pretty house and live in a nice neighborhood and raise your children to be polite and, upstanding citizens of the community? And so in my family, a lot of it was about grades. Academics was very, very important. in my family. And so that was something I was naturally good at. I didn't have to work really, really hard to get good grades, which will come up later when law school becomes a nightmare, but it requires a totally different level of work than I had ever had to experience before. But because I did well in school, that brought me a lot of praise and it seemed easy for me, but that's where I really focused a lot of my attention. And I think that, I enjoyed school because I was good at it and I enjoyed learning. But I also enjoyed, I also enjoyed being the A student and bringing home the report card. And that was like a celebratory moment for me. And it wasn't that way for, all of my cousins and things like that. And so, I think while I was growing up, there was just always this idea that, I would be successful and I would, have something where I'm using my brain in some form or fashion. Of course, then I wanted to go into musical theater, and that was a total diversion. And instead I ended up being a lawyer, because what is being a lawyer other than theatrics and intellectual exercises? I assumed that's exactly what it was because that's what I saw on TV.
Right. Obviously.
Right. Did you attempt musical theater, or did you say like, that's too much outside of like my path that I'm supposed to be on?
So I think, I had a catastrophic medical issue when I was a teenager that kind of broke up my high school experience. And I think for a lot of people who are in kind of creative arts, that is a formative time for you, right? You're participating in things, you're starting to get really good at it, you're starting to form your craft. Maybe you're getting, placed in roles in high school musicals or community theater. And I ended up needing to have a liver transplant when I was 14 years old. So I missed part of school. Then we moved across the country, and I felt like I wasn't in enough with all the drama people and all of the politics of High School Musical to be able to advocate for myself to get these roles. And so I kind of said, you know what I can still do? I can still get good grades. That is something that I can do without politics, without anything else. And so that's really where I concentrated my effort. And I kind of, I gave up on my musical theater dream, though it will creep up later in my life for sure. But I decided, law school is going to be my thing. And so when I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to go to law school, and I then crafted my entire college experience around that goal.
What was it about law school that sort of called to you? Was there something specific in the field that brought your, that captured your attention or that made you want to go? Or was it just, an idea that you had and you're like, okay, well, this is the natural path for me?
Well, I didn't have any lawyers in my family, but it was, kind of one of those professions like lawyer, doctor, engineer, right? All
yeah,
the
of course.
Hear about. But when I took government as my summer school class, because like I said, I really like school. And so I took an extra summer school class before my senior year, and it was government and econ. And my teacher was really, he was like a radical from the 60s. And so when we got to the civil liberties unit, he really went in, and it was just very exciting. And that year they were planning on bringing dogs onto campus. And so I went all off on the Fourth Amendment, and I went to the school board meeting to object to the dogs being brought onto campus. I was like, how are you going to do these random searches of every locker and every car? Why don't you work with the teachers and the other professionals to identify where the actual risk areas are? How are you going to determine success? If the dogs find something, that's a success. If they don't find anything, that's a success. So you've automatically created this paradigm where this is going to work, regardless of whether it's actually working. And, I did my whole speech and I was all fired up. And of course the dogs came on campus and everyone loved them. They're so cute and whatever, everybody wanted to pet them. But that was like my first failure as an advocate.
Right.
But I enjoyed it. And it was, I did feel like I got to use, some of my public speaking and, theatrical skills as a presenter. In addition, I knew it was going to be intellectually challenging. And I did want that for my future career. And so law school then became this thing that I just focused on. I said, okay, well, now I know what I want to do. And when I've gone back and thought about it, I'm pretty sure my sister said that she wanted to go to law school at some point. And that probably, I adore my older sister.
Sure.
And even though we didn't always get along, I still revered her. And I'm sure there was a seed in my brain like, oh, that must be a good thing to do. That must be something cool people do. I'm going to do this. And then I went there and learned differently.
I was going to say, did law school and big law live up to your expectations of defending, students against, their, having their civil liberties taken away?
Yeah, I have similar questions. As somebody, and I just want to elaborate the question because as somebody who had a similar path to what you've described as like a former artist who then went to law school and went, oh God, what have I done to myself? And then became an artist again. I think a lot of us go into law, and as somebody and I suspect this about you, whose identity was very tied to the fact that I was good at school and people knew I was good at school and were like, that person is good at school. And that was a large part of my identity because I did not develop the rest of my identity very well. Going to law school and not being great at law school was a real shock to the system. And so I don't know, I would love to hear just sort of more about that journey for you, like what it was like to be in law school. And you alluded to this earlier that like law school was a wake-up call for you about what it was like to be in a harder educational setting. And then I worked in big law, Tova worked in big law. We all know what big law is like. So I would love to just hear more detail about what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, I think law school can be a very different experience for everyone because you kind of bring a little bit of yourself to it, right? And I went straight through because I knew that I wanted to go to law school. So college was just like this stepping stone on the way. And so imagine I show up at Columbia after having done 4 years at the University of San Diego and after my senior year at the University of San Diego. And so I show up at Columbia and I am by far not the smartest person in the room anymore. And I didn't have that experience again for many, many years because of the people I now surrounded myself with. And so it was probably one of the first times that I was academically insecure. I wasn't sure how I was doing vis-a-vis other people. I definitely felt like I was at some sort of a disadvantage because I didn't know a lot of lawyers. I didn't really know how to study because I never really had to study, right? I was just to cram it in, and you can't cram in 50 cases before the final. Nope. That system doesn't work as well when you have, this huge amount of reading material you have to get through. So that was a learning curve for me. And I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I actually did really well my first semester. I got straight A's. And so then I started to think, oh, maybe this is like the University of San Diego. Maybe I can. And then I proceeded to not get straight A's until my final semester.
Oh, no.
But so I think, but I did enjoy it. It was still, it was academically challenging, but I loved the discussions in the hallways. Yeah. I will say that, I think some of the, I went to Columbia because it was the best school that I got into, which is why I ended up with $200,000 of student loans, because it's the best school you get into. I probably wasn't their top choice. And so they're just like, well, yes, you can come in, but we're not going to give you any money. Right. And so pay through the nose for your entire education, which I did. But being there, once you're in, everyone's pretty collegial because we're just like, oh, thank God. Okay, we're in the door. Okay, like maybe we can relax a little bit. They don't rank their students, so you don't have this like fierce competition between students themselves saying, oh, well, if you do better on the exam, then I'll drop in rank, and that's going to be a problem for me looking for jobs or something like that. So in that respect, but it was like 300 people who want to be lawyers. So there's some strong personalities in there, right? That I wasn't prepared for exactly. Yeah. So I really enjoyed law school, though I had a fairly non-traditional experience because I spent my entire second year pregnant. And then I spent my entire third year with newborns and going on toddlers. But the school and my friends and that community were very, very supportive of me the entire time. And so I think I might have gotten, kind of like a softer version of law school that many people do. And I was forced to prioritize my time, my energy, very early on in my law school career. And so I think because of that, and I thank my children every day for, keeping me human while all of these other, transformations were going on vis-a-vis my career and, all of that stuff. But, I still wanted to be a lawyer when I graduated, and I just didn't realize what it would be like when I actually got out. I was still in the dream of law school. I was like, I'm still learning. It's so fun. My seminars and just doing this research on fascinating legal topics. And I showed up at my firm.
I have to say, it's so nice to meet you, although we met, but it's nice to meet, I loved law school. I loved it. It was the way I thought college was supposed to be, where there were conversations and intellectual discussions and I wasn't at the top of my class, but I was challenged and it was interesting. And so there are a lot of people who I don't know if it's accurate to say there are a lot of people who like being lawyers, but there's a lot of people who are lawyers who really didn't like law school. And it was a means to an end, whereas I loved it. But I want to ask some questions about what you said about prioritizing, but we're going to take a quick break first, and then we will be right back.
In case you didn't already know, we love talking.
True story. More than simply talking, we love researching, prepping, and bringing this podcast to life.
We launched We Go Boldly with the goal of reaching people dealing with the kinds of questions and concerns that we also face.
Things like how to hear my inner voice, how to make sure my habits are worth it and stick, how do I feel my feelings and still manage to function.
After years of personal work and lots of trial and error, we realized we have a lot to share on these topics.
Now we've been broadcasting for over a year, and we are proud of our podcast.
And to no one's surprise, we still have a lot to say and talk about.
We sure do. We need your help to keep going. Every episode takes time and money to create, and we would love your support.
So, if you like what we are doing, please support us by joining our Patreon community and becoming a monthly subscriber.
Join our Patreon community today at patreon.com/wegoboldly. We are so grateful to all of our supporters. Now, back to the show. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. I wanted to ask you, Jessica, because I think figuring out how to prioritize anything in your life is exceptionally hard. And you were obviously forced to, because you would have ended up in a hospital with exhaustion if you had not figured it out. So how did you figure out how to prioritize your life when you had newborns and you were in law school? Is it something that you innately knew? Did you look to examples around you? What did you do?
I think, so I will say it was easier to prioritize when I was in school than when I started working. And I give so much props to associates and partners who are pregnant and working at firms. I mean, I could pick whether or not I showed up to class. At one point, I was pregnant with twins. So Columbia has church-like pews for a lot of classes. I didn't fit physically in the seats anymore. And so they just let me stay home and have somebody take notes for me. But once the boys were here, that was really when I needed to start figuring out, how am I going to finish up this third year, take care of twins, plan for my career move, get ready to leave New York and move down to DC because that's where my firm was going to be, and just make it through this last year and not completely burn out, right, and fail. And I will say having support was huge. Again, that sister that I revere and adore came out to New York. She had a life in California and dropped everything to come out and spend my third year with me in New York, helping me care for my children, because I was a single mom and I was outnumbered by my kids immediately upon birth. And so she came out to help, but also I just dropped everything that wasn't absolutely essential. I mean, I went to class, I did my work, we took care of the boys. Did I have a social life? I took care of the boys and had play dates with other new moms. There actually were a lot of like folks having children in law school. We would get together for play dates in the seminar rooms, and it was like a fun little community. But if you ask me, oh, so like, did you go see any shows or did you enjoy the New York scene? No, I didn't. I did these other things. And, at the end of the day, if the boys were asleep and everybody had eaten and everyone had the normal number of bowel movements and,
Right.
and I had eaten and and I was prepared for the next day of whatever classes and things that I had to do, that felt like, okay, I've done it. Let me get up and do it again the next day. But I have to say it was I just had like these blinders on because I couldn't even distract myself with anything else going on. It was so much pressure that I felt like I didn't have the luxury to like spin out about anything. So I just got hyper focused on the few things that I needed to do really well and tried to get those things done. But that was it.
Once you completed law school and you moved on to your career in the firm, did it ease up? Did it get harder? How did you sort of manage the busyness of life? I mean, because that's what we're talking about this season, right? We're talking about all these things that get thrown at us and the expectations that we see around us, right? That culturally we start to feel pressure to participate in, that we keep up with our neighbors or that we have certain things, like certain cars, certain purses, certain material goods, or that we're, going on a kind of vacation that everybody's going on, all these sorts of things, or that, we have, Tova and I both have young kids, that they're in the right classes, that they're doing all these activities. I mean, this is, like this constant pressure that you're doing all the things. How did you navigate that and be an associate, which is like a 24/7 job?
Yeah, my early years as an associate were very difficult, I would say, for me personally, just because I was so concerned about, making it as an associate. I came now my firm knew obviously that I was pregnant when I came as a summer associate, because I literally came 6 weeks after I had given birth. So I was already known throughout the firm as the summer associate who gave birth and then showed up for the summer associateship, right? So I was also kind of had this lore about me that I'm just this woman who's just gonna like drop some kids and then come in and do her summer associateship. But everyone also knew that I had kids at home. And so they never, some of it I needed to push back on in terms of being invited on, trips for depositions or things like that, making clear that people knew that I had support and that, I could perform in the same ways as everybody else. I never wanted that to be used against me in my career. And so there was that pressure that I put on myself to make sure that no one thought that I wasn't performing at the same level. But when I think back on it now, and as my therapist helps me work through all of these issues, what did I do? I fractured myself into literally different personalities. And I was an associate at work. I was the best mom that I could possibly try to be at home until the kids went to sleep. And then I went back on the computer and I turned back into associate mode. I even fractured myself by seasons because, like I mentioned, my mother is from the Dominican Republic. And when I graduated from law school, she actually moved back there with my stepdad. They run a foundation. They're basically saints in the DR. They run a nonprofit health clinic and a preschool, and they're like raising a generation of healthy children in 5 poor communities outside of Santiago. But they had left the country, but that's where my boys spent their summers. So every summer, their summer camp was going down to the Dominican Republic, spending time with their grandparents that they wouldn't see otherwise. And I had those weeks off from being a mom full time. And that was when I had fun. And we literally had a term for it. That was Summer Jessica. And Summer Jessica had a very different life than other Jessica the rest of the year. And that's kind of what I would tell myself all year long. Like, yes, you're not going to get to do these things right now, but don't worry. Summer's coming. Summer Jessica's here. And then 3 days in, I'd be like, I miss my kids. Where are they?
Right. Of course.
Why haven't I eaten a regular meal in 48 hours? What's happening?
Crackers for dinner again.
Right? She didn't make the best decisions, like nutrition wise, or like. But now it's like figuring out how to put all those pieces together into something that feels more balanced. I think, being able to separate in that way was almost the only way that I knew how to function, given the level of stress that I was under when I was trying to do everything, and the release that I felt that I needed when, my boys would go away. And that's just how that's how I bargained with myself all year long. Like, I have this time to do this, and I have this time to do this, and they are separate. Never the twain shall meet. All of these things are kept completely siloed. And it wasn't until later when I, kind of shifted in my legal career and had more spare time, did I have to think about how to meld all of these parts of my personality together into like one complete human that just shows up everywhere as all of Jessica.
Yeah,
And
it sounds like survival mode at in a lot of ways, but it's also, I think, something that a lot of women struggle with, and I think we've heard from a lot of different women, is that we all have these different facets of our personalities and these different parts of our lives and different ways in which we interact with the world, and they don't always go together societally. The society doesn't always say that they're okay. And so when we start to feel like, okay, I'm a mom of young children, but I also want to go out and have drinks with my friends and like go dancing and, shake it a bit or whatever. And I also want to stay in and watch Netflix or read a book, or I also want to be career driven and have a high power profession. I have all these facets of my personality, and I think about them. I was talking about this with my husband. I think about them like, if you remember, if you know the symbol for the Olympics, all the rings, I think about them like we all have these rings of who we are, and they're all sort of pulled apart all the time by society. And if you work and work and work to push them together, they'll overlap in different ways. They don't all have to sit in one circle, right? You're not always going to overlap. Like, I'm not going to go out and get drinks and go dancing with my 9-year-old daughter. Like, that's inappropriate, right? But they do.
Although I think she would enjoy it.
She might enjoy it, yes. But they do overlap in certain places. And we're constantly, as women, told no, right? Like, you cannot be those people. You can't be a mom and be sexual. You can't be a mom and be a high-powered lawyer, or you can't be all these things, or you have to be all of them,
right?
And you have to be perfect at all of them all the time. And that's just unreasonable. And it sounds so much like what you were working through, and now you're sort of working towards with your therapist, which we always promote, yay therapy, working towards putting all back together. And I think a lot of that, and I do have a question, I promise. I think I do this all the time. A lot of that has to do with self-worth and this feeling of worthiness. And so for you, and I'm sorry, Tova, we have to take a break at some point. Well, I know I'm just babbling. Where in that process, does your self-worth come into play? Do you think about it? Do you have a sense of your own worthiness that comes to mind for you? Is it a conscious thing for you, or have you thought about it at all?
I mean, I think about it now more in terms of how I reflect back on how I defined it earlier, because I've had, what I consider to be really big transformations over my career, because I defined myself by my career, right? That was my self-worth. My self-worth was being the lawyer, right? I was a bit of a prestige fanatic, and, did all and enjoyed it. Right. I loved that my parents introduced me as their lawyer daughter. I loved, telling people when I got into Columbia and seeing the look on my college professor's face when he heard that I had gotten in. And I was like, oh, is that what this does to people? Well, then this is very nice. Let me continue on this path. Right. And went to a big firm, and I got to tell people that I worked at a big firm, and there's, oh, really? They're a good shop. I'm like, yes. Oh, is that surprising? Did you underestimate who you were talking to?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But all of that, I shed it and I got rid of it. And I didn't have that. When I didn't have that to rely on anymore, I had to re-examine, oh my gosh. So I'm like just a human walking on the earth, and I've done some things, and I've birthed some people, and, but also not wrapping up my self-worth in my children, right? Because that becomes very dangerous for them and for who they're allowed to be. And so, gosh, this is absolutely something that I continue to work on. I am in what I call the middle stage of my next transformation, right? Becoming a business owner, which is totally outside my comfort zone, but also now being an empty nester. My children are 19. They're off doing their own things. They're like complete human beings, interesting to have conversations with, also don't always agree with me. Sometimes they make really good arguments and it's frustrating for me. I've raised very intelligent, argumentative people.
So frustrating.
But that is, being able to release myself from them is becoming more of a point of pride for me, that, wow, they get to do all these things. It doesn't have to have anything to do with me. And also, where am I going to find my value? And, the work that I do with my clients now really does provide a lot of my fulfillment. And, to the theme for today, part of it is balancing not becoming the same exact workaholic that I was before with something that I truly enjoy and is truly fulfilling, to still allow myself to try to keep some of the balance that I've been working so hard to create.
Well, I think that's an excellent point that we haven't actually talked about too much, which is you can still be a workaholic, even if you're loving every minute of it. And you still need to, and I think it's one reason that I'll just speak for Riley and myself and say, it's very helpful for us that we're a partnership, because we can hold each other accountable, not to do the work. I mean, sometimes that's helpful to be like, okay, what are our goals for this week? But hold ourselves accountable to say, I'm not feeling well. And the other person says, well, then we're canceling this today. Like, whereas if we were on our own, would be forcing ourselves to do something that it's just like, no one has that expectation for you. Don't have it for yourself. And so we, I think, are more accountable to each other to encourage the resting side of things, and like that this will get done eventually. And so we do need to take a quick break, our last one. But then when we come back, I'll give you like a sneak peek. I just kind of, I love that you sort of recognize, because this is what we talked about last season, that like we are either at the beginning, the middle, or the end of a transformation, and then the next one just starts right away. But I'm wondering, how did we get from, this life where you are working like you have no children and momming like you don't work, to a life where, sneak peek, you're traveling the country as a business owner in an RV? Like, something shifted where you were willing to let go of something that was really important to you, or that was providing you that sense of worth. So that's what I'm going to ask about, but we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Hey, Tova, you know what I love?
Coffee, definitions, uninterrupted reading time.
Okay, all of those things are true, but I also love maps.
As in Siri, take me to the beach?
Yeah, also as in who am I really and who do I want to be?
Yeah, I figured that's what you meant, but I also have the beach on my mind, so...
Well, we were talking about things we love, so that definitely makes sense. But the map I was thinking about is our Defining You course.
Yes, we put together Defining You as a way to map where you are and how you want to live your life.
So true. So many people struggle to find their purpose in a busy and noisy world.
That's why we made Defining You, our course meant to guide you to creating your own mission statement.
And there's good news. You can get it now on teachable.com. Find the link on our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/courses, or check out the link on our Instagram bio at Go Boldly Together.
We can't wait to see you there. Now, let's head back to the show. Welcome back, everyone. So to my question, what happened? Because something happened to get you from big law, doing all the things, summer Jessica, to being like, maybe I should actually be happy when it's not the summer.
Gosh, so the short answer is I got older. I had years of experience under my belt. And I think, there are a lot of things when I look back about kind of my past and, my having something catastrophic happen to you when you are, a teenager, I think can shape you in all different kinds of ways. Sometimes it's positive and sometimes it can have, some unintended consequences. But it kind of created this drive in me to do a lot early in life and, not feeling like I was on borrowed time. And then, having a surprise twins, then feeling like, okay, now I need to create lives for these little people and make sure that they're just like going to be okay. But because, all of those things happened when they did, I think that I'm now at a point in my life where I've lived a lot of life for the number of years that I've been on this planet. And I think my body was like, yeah, I think you're good. I think you've done a lot. So if you want to take your foot off the gas, it's going to be okay. I remember my husband, who I met when my children were teenagers, which is always exciting. God bless him. My husband took me to Greece for my 40th birthday. And the kids were they were like basically in like their last years of high school or getting ready to be. We could already tell they're going to be okay. They're starting to make good decisions. Like they have good judgment. That's great. They're nice human beings. They're kind, right? They're brave when they need to be. And I had left the Securities and Exchange Commission, which was the next place that I went after I left my firm. I had a little extra time on my hands. I was starting my business, and I was sitting in a cafe in Santorini, yes. And I was thinking to myself, if I died today, I would be okay with that. I feel like I have lived a good life, and I feel like my greatest fears have not come true. Nothing traumatic happened to my children, over the course of their early years. And I didn't, suffer malpractice insurance or anything. Never had to use it. And I'm in this, I have an amazing relationship now. It took many years to get there, but I have an amazing relationship now. And I just felt so satisfied. And I wasn't used to feeling that way. And I think that has freed up in me all of this capacity to feel like, well, whatever I choose to do from here on out, it's gonna be gravy. So let's make it good gravy if we can, because who wants bad gravy on the side on top of everything else? And and if it doesn't work out, it's also going to be okay, because I am enough right now. I have enough, and I had never felt that way before. And so I think that was really a defining moment for me, and it has led to this moment now where I'm basically, it's like all gravy all the time. I'm like living and swimming in gravy, right? I am living my dream of traveling around the US in an RV and helping people through my business and like having all of it. Still trying to balance, because I want to say that it's amazing, but it's also like it's a little tiring. But I'm all for RV van life or whatever, but yes, there are some rough portions to it, as with everything. but it's also pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And it's what I imagine for myself. And the fact that it's here is still like, I still get goosebumps about it.
That's fantastic. I mean, in the beginning, when we first started talking, you mentioned, when we were talking about what success is, you mentioned that it's hard for you to accept that you feel successful, that you feel like this is success and that you're not in a position where you have to keep striving. And I wonder if you were able to untie success to self-worth, if it would be a lot easier to get to the point where you could accept the success and not feel that compulsion to strive, right? If the success and the self-worth were separated, because I think for a lot of us, we tie those two things together. I mean, that's all we've been talking about all season, right? Is that the two are connected for so many reasons, and they shouldn't be, because, Tove and I have our own definition of self-worth, and that is that you are worthy. Full stop. That is, you don't have to do anything. You are born, you breathe, you're worthy, and that's it, right? There's no necessary steps, no predicate, it just is. And so when we tie our worthiness, our value to doing, then we're constantly striving in order to increase our value. And so if we can find a way to maybe start to unravel those threads so that our value isn't necessarily attached to our doing, it becomes much easier to accept our own success and to celebrate it and to be like, yay, I'm successful. And it's so much easier to say than to do, because I'm certainly not perfect at it. But I wonder if you have thought about it in those terms, and if that's something that you could see yourself doing in the future, if you could see yourself putting a plan into action to move towards, that would make your life, I want to say easier, but that's not the right word. I've lost the word that I really wanted, but would make your life more satisfying, maybe.
Maybe like less successful, but what's a euphemism for that, right? Like less
Right,
objectively successful,
but just
right?
make it more
like
content, that you've gotten the things, not the things, but you're doing the things that you want to be doing, and that those things are not necessarily tied to your value as a human. Maybe what you really want to be doing is reading 8 hours a day. I don't know.
I think about this all the time now, because I'm in, the online business space, which you're just inundated with messages of, you got to make your first million, you got to scale up. You need to be able to serve more people. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to get bigger, bigger, bigger. And it's interesting coming from, not all people who start their own businesses, necessarily had like a high paying career before they did that. Right. So I know what it feels like to make $100,000 a year. I know what it feels like to make way more than that. Right. But I also know what I sacrificed in order to create that kind of financial success. And so my body is almost like triggered by those kinds of thoughts, because it attaches the work to the revenue generation. But I think that, for me, I also need to just examine, is that even something I'm interested in? I never aimed to be a millionaire. That wasn't why I started my business. That wasn't why I left the law. If I wanted to be a millionaire, I should have stayed at my firm. That would have been easier.
Yeah.
And that isn't my definition of success. I don't want to run a multi-million-dollar mega corporation. I don't want to have, 100 people on staff. That isn't what I want for my life. I have a very different vision of what I want for my life, and I'm kind of living it right now. So I sometimes feel like, the parable of the fisherman, living his beautiful, I fish every day, I go home and have dinner with my family. Oh, don't you want to turn this into a megalomania corporation so you can retire and go home and fish every day and have dinner with your family? Nope. I think I'll skip the middle part. I think I'll just continue fishing every day and having dinner with my family. But it's weird, because it's just that's not what we're trained to do. And so I don't have a lot of mentors in that space that I can say,
it is hard.
how they do it.
earlier, like way earlier, you mentioned how this job for you was fulfilling. And I think that's a really special word that we should use more when we're talking about success. Now, and we said this at the top of the season, and it doesn't hurt to reiterate. We recognize that it requires people to work really hard sometimes to put food on their table and pay their rent. And that's not what we're talking about. Like, we're not talking about that base level of food to survive, right? Like, and money to survive. But we're talking about when you have a career, is it, and you're above that level of basic survival, which, let's be honest, like the large part of the country isn't above that level. But that to define success is I'm being fulfilled by this, but then also to be able to separate that from my self-worth. Like, I am still enough. Like you said, I am enough, I have enough, but I can also still strive, if we want to strive for something, for a job that's fulfilling and that is giving me the things that I need so that I am content and I am fulfilled, but that isn't required to fill any void that is being left by like society's ravaging me on, you have to achieve, you have to do that. And it requires sort of a constant check-in to really figure out how do you do this. And so I do have there's a question here as well, because it's just the one thing that we haven't talked about yet that I always like to talk about, and I think that is something that other people can learn from, which is, okay, so you have this you're living your best life right now and your dream life that you wanted to, but you do have to keep an eye on yourself for making sure that like you're not tripping into that workaholic zone, even though that you love you're doing. And you currently in your immediate life aren't living in a world where there's tons of structure. How do you make sure that you're getting the rest that you need and that you're prioritizing the things to keep you from that feeling of busyness?
This is my current struggle right now. I just did some time blocking on my calendar for June because April and May were insane. Now, part of that was by design, because for my husband's 50th birthday, we are going to be following his dearly beloved Atlanta Falcons around for their entire football season. So we have a lot of travel over the months from September to December. And I didn't want to constantly be on Zoom, right? I didn't want to be, putting PowerPoints together for my clients and have a really heavy workload. So I fashioned my year to be fairly heavy in the beginning. And then we ended up leaving on our RV trip early. So I had to balance a really heavy workload with a new experience of doing it all from an RV. And I'll be honest, I didn't do a very good job in the beginning. I was getting burned out and I was all upset because I'm like, I'm living my dream, but it feels a little bit like a nightmare. What is happening? I've been fooled by my brain again. You told me this is what you wanted. I gave it to you and I'm here and now I'm struggling. What has happened? But literally, I seriously, like, some time blocking has saved me, and it just wasn't even that complicated. But also, I don't, right? I run my own business, and I get to make all of my decisions, which is, a blessing and a curse, because every decision is, if it's wrong, it's my fault. But I also get to frame it however I want, and so I've had to do that work that I was always too lazy to do, of actually figuring out what do I want my day to feel like. What does my natural rhythm feel like, and like kind of examine myself for a little while to get some data, and then decide, what, I can't do these things 3 days in a row. That doesn't work very well. I need to create some spaces. And I think that's probably what has always been missing from my life, because I'm kind of just like jam everything in, like sleep when you die, kind of used to be our family motto. It's so embarrassing. We had t-shirts. It's just so, I feel so bad for what I did to my children, the model that I was setting for them. But now I realize, what, if I want to enjoy my day, then I can't just save the rest and the relaxation for when everything is done. I have to be much more intentional about spacing things out, and also about creating boundaries with my own business. Because
Right.
if I had, if I really got to make my choice, I would work all the time. I love
Yes.
it. And I love every aspect of it. I love talking to my clients. I love working on their strategies. I love, setting up extra sessions to make sure they're getting the support that they need. I love, writing posts to my audience so they can see what's going on or how they could handle a problem. I love talking to my VA about what we're going to be doing next month. All of it. I love all of it. And there's a lot of it if I want there to be a lot of it, right? So I have to create that boundary and put those controls in place to protect myself from myself a little bit, because nobody's telling me to do it. I mean, yes, I have a boss, and she's horrible. No, I'm just kidding. She's lovely. She's me. But I do have to kind of control what would be my workaholic tendency, because that's my comfort zone. That's what made me, that's what brought me the life that I have now. But it also brought me some of the life that I have now where, maybe I'm not the best friend in terms of keeping in touch with people. And maybe, I wasn't the best at relationships earlier. Not like I'm the best now, but you know what I mean. I've improved. I get the most improved.
That's all we can do.
Yeah.
But, recognizing that I need those boundaries and nobody's going to put them in place for me has been really important in my journey as a business owner. And also just recognizing that, if you need to block out rest time, that's an important block on your calendar. And it should have the same weight as your client sessions, as your back office work, as all of those other things that you're doing. But it is constantly a work in progress.
Well, and I think you already figured out that I read something recently that said, if you have 10 nights in a row of not getting enough sleep, that is the equivalent. It's all cumulative. And that's the equivalent of an all-nighter. And so you have figured out you can't go totally bonkers April and May and then just be I'll rest up in June. It'll all be fine. Rest doesn't work that way. Whether it's actual sleep rest or the other kinds of rest that we're talking about, you need to figure out how to integrate it. And just because you have the freedom doesn't mean you actually know how to do that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's actually harder.
If I can't do it living in an RV, making all the decisions easily, so that's not the issue. Right? There's something else that needs to be changed and adjusted to bring that balance around, because I am the poster child for changing your circumstances and it still doesn't fix the actual problem.
Right.
So, it can help, right? Of course it can help. It can definitely get us a part of the way, but you might, if you're a natural workaholic, that's probably something you're going to have to work on regardless of what you think your job is.
Yeah, of where you are. Yeah, it's definitely an internal situation. I think it's time for quick response questions. Although again,
sadly,
I love our
we
guests.
could just keep talking forever. We love this.
This is great. But we do have to do quick response questions because it's getting late and we can only go for so long. So the way this works, we have 5 questions. I'm going to ask you, and you can answer in short 1 or 2 sentences. I am not supposed to ask you follow-up questions, which I say every time annoys me because I always have follow-up questions. That's fine. I'm gonna keep it together. You ready?
Boundaries, Riley.
I have none.
Yes.
No, that's not true. I have tons of boundaries.
She has awesome boundaries.
I have all the boundaries.
Yeah.
Too many boundaries. All right. You ready? Let's do this.
Ready.
Number 1. What is on your nightstand?
My nightstand is very tiny. I live in an RV. I have a weighted eye mask to help me sleep, and earplugs because sometimes we're sleeping in awkward places where it's very loud. Those are the most important things that I need at night.
Love it.
Okay. Number 2. Who is at the top of your playlist right now?
We listen to a lot of smooth jazz. I cannot hear words in the morning. I can relate. And Latin music. I'm getting back into merengue and salsa that I used to listen to when I was a child. And, my mother would play it all the time. And I remember why I love it so much. It just it enlightens something inside of me, and it just wakes up my entire body. I love it.
Love it.
Love that. Number 3, how do you relax?
If I can get in a bubble bath, that is just like such a luxury. I tried to lobby for a bath in the RV, and that was absurd. And it's not a feature that comes on many models.
You can have a bath or a kitchen. Which do you want?
Pretty much.
Oh my goodness. All right. Number 4, your favorite beverage.
So my husband and I, we love wine, and my favorite grape is Chambourcine, which is you turn it into a red wine, and you can serve it chilled or room temperature. So I love a reversible shirt. I'm obsessed with like outfits that you can wear 3 ways, and this is a wine that has multiple personalities, so I'm all over it.
I love furniture with storage, so I feel you. I get it. Number 5. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
So this goes to how I kind of arranged my career. I don't even remember who it was that told me. I think it was someone when I was interviewing at firms. They said, your children will not remember the early years as much as they will remember the late years. So if you have a choice, be there for the later years. And so I never felt guilty when I was away at the firm as a junior associate when my children were like 2 or 3. It's kind of like dogs. Like they don't have a sense of time. Like, oh, you're home. Oh my God, I love you so much. Oh my goodness. Oh, did you leave? Wow, it's great. But the 8-year-olds, the 9-year-olds, the 10-year-olds, they're sarcastic. They remember if you show up with the field trips, and they call you out on that stuff. And that's when I wanted to be there.
The best thing I've ever heard.
I love that. I could relate to that in so many ways.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you on social media or the web, or how can people find you?
Well, the easiest way to find me is probably on LinkedIn. You can find me. I'm one of the Jessica Medinas. I'm the only financial strategist for lawyers on there, I guarantee you.
Excellent.
And also my website is jessicamedinallc.com. If anyone needs personal finance tips for lawyers specifically, they can get lots of free resources on there. And if you're looking to make a transition, that's what I help lawyers do.
I will also add that you have an excellent newsletter.
Oh, good. Good.
Yes, I rarely open any, but I open yours more than others people's.
Nice.
If I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Love it.
But I do. It's great.
We will share all of that info in the show notes and on our social media, so you can find it easily when the show posts to all of our places where we put it. That's my very specific information. I just lost all the words. The words all left my brain. But thank you so much for being on the show today. It was so great to talk to you. I say this to all of our guests, and I mean it every single time. Thank you for sharing your personal life with us. I know it's hard. I'm always amazed by people who come on here and do it the first time, because it took me so long to be able to do it. And I really appreciate it. I know Tova does as well. And hopefully our listeners do. I think it's such a great opportunity for everyone to get just a better understanding of everyone's perspective on how these things impact all of us on our everyday lives, and how we can work towards having a more fulfilling life. And that's the goal, right? So we really appreciate you being here. We'll share everything in the show notes when we post the episode. And we will be back next week with more on busyness and self-worth. Thanks everyone for tuning in today, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy, and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.